Hello, everybody. This is JT Keating. I'm the Vice President of Product Marketing and Product Strategy here at Zimperium. Thank you for joining us for a great webinar. We're very, very fortunate to have an excellent guest speaker with us who knows this space extremely well. The topic is addressing the emerging mobile security threats facing state and local government. Zimperium has some significant experience in that regard, but nowhere near as much experience as Karen Jackson has, who I'll be introducing here in a second. Before we hop into that, standard issue webinar type stuff, we're going to gun for about 30 minutes to give you guys some information in a very brief period of time. If you have any questions, we will have a Q&A section at the end. Please use the Q&A capability that's on there. We have disabled the chat functionality because we've been finding that things continue to get lost in the Zoom chat. So if you have any questions, even if it's questions about technical issues, etc., please throw it in the Q&A section. This will be archived and put up on our website, a video recording of it, and we can make slides available as well. So with that, what I would like to do is introduce Karen Jackson. And you guys can all read her impressive bio here. But in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is pass it off to Karen. And Karen, maybe you could start off by giving a little bit of background on yourself. And then Karen will be joined by Chul Yim, who is our Director of State and Local Government here at Zimperium, at the tail end to tell you a little bit about Zimperium. So this is not a Zimperium product pitch. This is more about the issues and the reality of the issues facing state and local government. And so without further ado, Karen, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with the Zimperium team and to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about what governments are going through with the whole cyber challenge that's already with us and going to only get more pervasive as time goes on. As you can see on the slide, I was the former Secretary of Technology for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Had served in multiple capacities under multiple governors, culminating with the secretarial spot under Governor Terry McAuliffe. We worked night and day on cybersecurity. We looked at it, states are looking at this from a couple of different perspectives. One being the actual maintenance and oversight and the safety of the citizen-facing networks, the networks that support our employees every day, the systems that our citizens interact with, the citizens that house our data. And so we really had a very large push on that side. I had a CIO and a CISO that both reported to me, so we had some help on that side. But we also looked at this as a huge economic driver for Virginia. But recognizing the fact that if we didn't do our job well on keeping ourselves safe, that companies and that ability to call ourselves a true leader was going to suffer. As you can see, next slide, please. Virginia is not the only state who was paying attention to cyber. We actually hope more of them are paying attention to cyber now. We, during the time with the McAuliffe administration, he was actually the chair of the National Governors Association and selected cybersecurity as his chairman's initiative. The ultimate goal in that was to really raise all boats. And I say that, when we started the initiative, it was called Meet the Threat, State Confront the Cyber Challenge. It really was clear that we had some states that were doing very, very well, some that were doing okay, and then some really needed to start the conversation. And so we spent a year working with all the governors across the nation to really increase their cyber profile and to continue to work with them to not only recognize the inherent threats that are already there, and some, you see some of those that didn't fare very well. I think it's fair to note that eventually you're going to get hacked in some way, form, fashion. It's going to happen. I think that, we work very hard to not only talk about being prepared on the front end, but also how to react if something bad did happen. And so we know that states are moving forward. Obviously, as I said, you are going to get hit at some point. The question is how bad and how are you going to recover from it? And so you obviously want to do everything that you can up front to try to combat these threats. But it's tough. Next slide, please. If you think about the budgets that not only state government has, but the localities, the folks that are in the municipal governments, there's not a lot of risk capital there to be moved around to chase a new threat vector or to do an overhaul security implementation. And so states truly are really living on, a narrow margin. You can see that by the numbers, 70% of cities spent less than 5% of their IT budget on cybersecurity measures. That's not a lot. And states are not a whole lot different. It's interesting to me that the security awareness training on the slide was ranked number 1. I think we spent an awful lot of time, our CISO spent an awful lot of time doing training, but we had to recognize that, as long as there's a human in the loop, there's a chance for a problem and there's a chance for a mistake. And so we spent just an immense amount of time looking at tools, looking at how do we partner with the private sector. States don't move very fast. It's difficult for us to do all of the things that we would need to do in order to stay current in a cybersecurity environment. And really, truly, for most states, that's beyond the capability. So partnerships with the private sector, partnerships and information sharing between multiple layers of government becomes particularly important. You can go to the next slide, please. I think if you really sat down and talked to a CIO, these slides are, as you can see, sourced from eRepublic, the Digital State Survey. And, cybersecurity is forefront in everybody's mind. How do you get it? How do you pay for it? How do you train your people? And not only how do you train your people, but how do you hire the right people? There's a whole different conversation to be had around cyber workforce and credentialing and those sorts of things. But I think the takeaway, you'll see that shared services, cloud computing are on that list as well, hiring personnel, connectivity. You can go to the next slide. I think the idea at this point is that we are moving. It's a transformative time for government. Let me say it that way. We have moved from desktops to laptops. We're now moving from laptops to more mobile. During my time in the administration, BYOD became a big conversation. Bring your own device. All of those were mobile devices. We didn't have a lot of people showing up with large laptops saying, I want to put this on the network. It was always a mobile device. And the more we started to have conversations about smart communities, smart cities, smart states, the more sensors, the more devices that are attached to the networks, the higher the number of threat vectors comes naturally. States are not, as I said, we have personnel challenges, we have funding challenges. We have to be smart with the way that the money is spent in order to get the maximum protection for our citizens. And so as we move into a mobile environment, that's completely different than what a CIO and a CISO typically deals with. It's not only just the mobile environment, but there's also going to be the Internet of Things, and it's coming hard and it's coming fast at these CISOs, the CIOs, and they're having to truly grapple with how to effectively deal with the cybersecurity challenges that's presenting, not only from severity and potential, but also just volume. If you try to baseline a network and the data streams that you're getting are exponentially bigger than anything that you've ever been baselining before, you have to figure out where's the noise, where's the real things, how do you deal with that? And so it becomes even more imperative, and you can flip on to the next slide. It becomes even more imperative that you find good partners and you find good technologies that can take some of that load off. There was no way when we were going through our cybersecurity initiative that we were going to be able to bring everything that we needed to do in-house. We looked at it, we talked about it, but it simply wasn't an effective situation for anybody because we couldn't keep up with the knowledge base that was exploding within the private sector. And so we did have to rely quite a bit on partnerships. And that's not always the most comfortable place for a government to be, but we're going to have to continue to move in that direction, as I mentioned. I think the mobile side is going to be, it's going to only get more pervasive. The IoT piece with smart communities, Virginia has a smart cities initiative, smart state initiative, and it's not just at the state level, it's at the local level, it's at county, cities, towns, individual citizens. We're becoming more and more intertwined from a connectedness standpoint, but also from a vulnerability standpoint, because the more connected we are, the more vulnerable we are. And so more and more diligence is going to have to be paid to looking at how the citizens touch our networks and how those touch points are secured and how we're able to deal with those in an environment where citizens are constantly demanding more and more flexibility, more and more mobility, more and more access, more and more transparency. There's a huge balancing act that's going to have to go on, and it's starting now. I'm not saying that this hasn't already started. Got states that are doing a good job of it. I would put Virginia in that category, but the magnitude of the task that's coming at us requires us to be able to find good partners who can take part of the load and offer technologies and experience and knowledge that simply just isn't a possibility, under the constraints. And you can see all the priorities there. As we move to the cloud, that's just one more chapter with mobility and the security side of the house that CIOs and CISOs are having to grapple with on a daily basis. Chul, I think at that point, I'm going to turn that over to you. And let you take it from there.
All right. Karen, thank you so much. So good morning, everyone. Want to just jump into this slide here. One thing to note with this slide outside of just the rise of mobile internet usage is that last year there were about 350 million global shipments of PC laptops shipped out. In comparison, when you look at mobile devices, that number was 2 billion. And so a 6x increase on the amount of mobile devices. And as you can tell, that also has changed from 2014 to now, the consumption of them. And so moving that to the next slide, and we're talking about some of these trends and figures with clear and present danger. GT, it looks like the slide went down, but we'll go ahead and GT, if you want to send that over to me, happy to
sorry about
take it
that.
over.
If you can just do the share screen at the bottom there, Chul, then you can take it over.
Perfect.
And that is
all right.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
All right, perfect. All right, so we're going to go ahead into some of these trends and figures. So when you're looking at last year, Apple, Google, record number of security patches. It's only going to increase from there. And one of the key takeaways within the mobile landscape is that the user is the administrator on that device. And so if you're working in the enterprise mobile space, you need visibility on all those unmanaged profiles that are on device that the user may be creating for themselves and not even know it. And so, the other takeaway is that a lot of the updates on these patches are not just feature updates. They may market them as feature updates, but they're really security patches. And we've dug in on this because our Z Labs, which is our mobile threat research team, they recorded and submitted about 18 CVEs last year. CVE being critical vulnerabilities and exposures. And a lot of those required the operating system to need to patch themselves. And so that's going to continue to increase. Mobile, as more people use their mobile for even the things that did with desktops and laptops, it will definitely move that direction. And the second bullet point is interesting because I feel like I also was one of those people who, when I had an iPhone 5S, and I think the 7 and 7S came out, I was always nervous of updating my operating system because I was afraid that it would drain my battery or it would make my phone run much slower. And I believe a couple months ago that was a fairly true statement. I think Apple admitted that it wasn't necessarily they were doing it on purpose, but it was just based off of the updates. And so, you know, if I think that way, others may as well, and they'll just want to hold off. And, you know, the other aspect of it is I just met with a university hospital system last week, and they told me that they were moving from pagers over to older mobile phones that will be used as pagers. The challenge is you still have you have incredible functionality on these older phones, and they can connect to the Wi-Fi networks. They can download apps still, and so that was just something that was shared with me, and wanted to share that over to you as well. So when we're looking at the different type of attacks, they're not really created equally. I would say the priority, if you're looking at targeting someone, would be the network, then the device, and then the apps. I know the conversation has been around apps for a long time, but you know, if I'm targeting someone, I'm not going to create an app. I'm not going to put that on the iOS or Android store, and I'm going to pray that they download that app. If I were to really focus on someone like an elected official, I'm gonna find out where their offices are. I'm sure there's gonna be a coffee shop. Want to create some rogue access points. And you know, the other thing about phones that create a threat is that I'm sure you've looked at your phone sometimes, and you're kind of wondering why it connects to a Wi-Fi network, even though you weren't intentionally doing so. Is because our phones actively broadcast Wi-Fi hotspots and are looking for Wi-Fi hotspots that we've connected before. And you know, personally, I've connected with over 100 Wi-Fi hotspots just on my travels. And so, once it's looking for a signal, and it's familiar with it, it will connect to it. And that happens to me a lot at airports. And so, one of the other takeaways here is just making sure that you know the difference between a jailbroken phone and a compromised phone. Well, the jailbroken one is normally user initiated. There's some enterprise mobility management tools that can help detect some of this. But really what we want to focus on is the compromised one, where the hacker is attempting to gain escalated privileges to the device at the kernel layer. And those are the type of attacks that you really want to defend yourself against. And so I know I talked a little bit about apps, and I do believe protecting your mobile enterprise from malicious apps is very important. But also, you know, user education and cybersecurity awareness, as Karen mentioned, those are priorities. I believe the employee that is the weakest link is your greatest vulnerability. And so there are states like Missouri that are doing a great job on cybersecurity awareness training, continually keeping their employees on their toes, testing, and then sharing the ones that have failed, you know, new approaches to focus on how to be better when they're accessing their devices. And so, you know, but sometimes you just can't tell what is real and what is malware. So, you know, looking at this advanced photo editor, it looks very Instagram-esque as the logo. And, you know, and the pictures look fairly good. If you have a niece or nephew, son and daughter, and you want to add some filters onto your pictures, might as well look at this. It's in the Android store. It's free. So do I really want to pay for something without testing it? So I'm going to download this. It's free. And when ends up happening, this is actually a Trojan malware in the Google Play Store. Just looking at the BBC app, as you can tell, there's actually two BBC apps. They look exactly the same, but one is malware and one's not. And the only way that you could tell with which one was real and which one's fake is in the description in the LLC, there was parentheses around the real one and brackets around the fake one. So, some of these you're hoping the user can figure it out, but at the end of the day, sometimes you just don't know which one is real, and you want to protect yourself from these type of attacks. Now we kind of get into a little bit more of the technology and kind of our mindset in approaching this. And so Z9 is Zimperium's on-device machine learning detection engine. It's for active threat defense. And so this technology either can be on your phone via an app called Zips, or you can actually, and cities and certain states are building apps themselves, but you can actually build this Z9 algorithm into your own app to protect it through an SDK. And so that's just one possibility, but really the technology that is out there is we just want to provide visibility into your mobile network, enterprise network, so that you can improve your risk posture, but also detect and defend against advanced threats. And at the end of the day, you want to keep those compromised phones. One, you want to protect them, but you want to make sure they're not going to jump onto the government networks where critical infrastructure and sensitive information reside. So, and Z9 does that via the device, network, and application layers. And so just want to touch upon this in terms of, this is our Zips app. This is what it looks like. And this app actually can be downloaded in the iOS and Android store, but access to this has to be given through our console. And this is not a consumer app. It's an enterprise grade app. But ideally, the way that you want to push this down to all your mobile users is it can be pushed down through your EMM, such as BlackBerry, AirWatch, Mass 360, Intune. We have one partner, Mobile Iron. They actually have this engine already embedded in their agent. So if you're a Mobile Iron customer, you want to talk to them because they can actually turn on a switch, and you're going to have the Z9 technology on their agent. So just some things to show in terms of how it would roll out, and want to just couple of use cases. I know this is not government, but the story is interesting, and this could happen to any government contractor or anyone else that is looking to access personal stuff on their corporate device or their government device. But this person wanted to access their Gmail, couldn't do it through how the phone was controlled. So anything else you want to try out some VPNs to get access. They found a VPN on one of the app sites, and they installed it. But when they installed it, they created an unmanaged profile on iOS. And what did this free VPN do? It started decrypting all the data. And luckily, this phone had Zips on it. It detected it right away. It notified the admin. The admin locked down the phone and was able to remediate so that nothing bad could happen, or it wouldn't jump to the government network outside of that. And then this is one of our most favorite stories, and I didn't put the city on it just yet because there's a big announcement next month. But this is one of our customers, one of the largest cities in the U.S. Very dense city. They have municipal Wi-Fi, citizen service kiosks, where you can make internet phone calls. Also, they have USB jacks where you can charge your phone, as well as the hundreds, if not thousands, of Wi-Fi hotspots all around the city. Now, with that large of a footprint, what they were looking for just visibility into their mobile network with all the devices that were out there, and then have threat defense so that they could remediate as quickly as possible on these attacks in their mobile workforce. And so, that's great on the mobile workforce side, but they took it one step further, and this will be the release next month. But the mayor's office wanted to offer these similar protections to the residents. And, that's a novel concept. I don't think anyone else is doing that, but they wanted to do it without impeding the privacy and collecting any data, which is huge in the era that we live now. And, sometimes we look at this and say, well, why didn't they just have people download a free app that does similar services that are out there? And, nowadays, when you're downloading something free onto your phone, either they're collecting data on you or they're going to use some of your information and sell that off to a third party. I think, government offering these services is a very novel concept. And then just kind of going into this last slide, a lot of times when we talk with potential customers, the first thing they say, well, we haven't seen any mobile threats or attacks, but we're still worried that we're not getting that visibility. And, but as our customers start to roll out and deploy the Zips apps out to their, mobile networks, 100% of our customers have detected a mobile threat. And so just in conclusion, we know there are significant vulnerabilities in your enterprise network. And, without the visibility to see them, you just can't defend yourself properly. And we just want to be a part of the solution as you are trying to protect all your endpoints, whether from your server, desktop, PC, all the way to the mobile endpoint. So with that, JT, I will pass that back over to you.
Thank you very much, Chul, and thank you very much, Karen. Now, folks, is the part that everybody always loves, which is getting to the Q&A section of this. And so once again, if you can just use the Q&A capability down below. First question, Karen, is for you. At least I think it should be for you because I think you are less biased potentially. And the question is basically, do you see more cities or counties taking a page from the city that was just, I'm paraphrasing it, from the city that Chul was just discussing? Do you see more cities trying to proactively protect their citizens?
I think as Chul mentioned, that's a pretty novel concept. I think, at least in Virginia, we were concerned more about our employees and those devices that were hooked to our network. I think long term, that's going to be the way everybody's going to have to go. I think it's just a matter of time, and we're on an adoption curve at this point. I mean, this is not something that we have dealt with, in depth or in mass in the past. And so, I mean, I think at some point, recognizing that at some point a citizen is touching a government network when they access an app to pay a bill. They're accessing, when they want to check on the status of their tax return. I mean, there's a million reasons why a citizen will want to come back and touch, a state system. And that's great. And we want to be as responsive as we can and do, give everybody the flexibility that they want. It works for everybody. But the more sophistication in the apps, the more sophistication in the level of touches and the types of touches and the frequency of touches, what's on that phone touches our network. And if those phones aren't secure, then we're putting ourselves at undue risk for additional, bad actors. I'll put it that way. So I think ultimately, this is kind of a vanguard move on the part of that city. But I think when push comes to shove, others are going to follow that model because it makes a lot of sense from a security standpoint for the systems that the state and the localities and everybody does manage.
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree with you on that. One of the things that I found interesting, just as there's some other questions coming in, but just as they are coming in, one of the things I thought was interesting on your, I think it was your second slide, I thought it was interesting to see the size of the counties and or municipalities that have been impacted by cyber. All the way down to relatively small cities, all the way up to cities like Atlanta. And, so it's not just, it's to your point about being potentially impacted, it's not just the biggest targets anymore. Is that a fair comment?
Oh, absolutely. I think, the biggest, technically, if you just kind of go ratio to ratio, the larger the enterprise, you would think the larger the spend, probably not by percentage, but by dollar. If you have a much bigger budget, you spend 5%. If you have a tiny budget, you spend 5%. There's obviously a difference in what you're spending. But I think for some of the more rural locations, some of the much smaller locations, a lot of these guys don't even have IT staff. They have a website, they have a few things that, they put out, but by and large, it's not, a similar environment to a large city or to some of the ones that are listed on that first slide. And so actually the smaller you are, the more vulnerable you are. And I think that, that tags with what you're saying, but nobody's impervious to this. I think you can do the best jobs that you can do. But at some point, somebody's going to get smart and they're going to be able to permeate the security in some way. The trick is to minimize the impact of that. But we are all going to have to come to the realization that anybody, and governments are networked. We share some level of data. We have systems that interact with each other, and we have to recognize that those that aren't secure, that don't have IT staffs, are putting everybody up the chain, in a vulnerable spot. Not only that, but third-party vendors. You look at different ways that, Anthem had a situation that came in through, a partner. That Anthem is the vendor for a lot of states. There, but by the grace would have gone any of us. Target came in through an HVAC system.
Yep.
So, you start to look at the spread of the vectors and you start to look at the complexity of it. And it's going to be very, very difficult for those municipalities, cities, towns, whomever, that don't have a solid 24/7 IT staff to even have a hope of being able to deal with the types of threats that they're going to see coming at them now.
No, I think that's perfect. So we have another question that just came in that said, do you know of other major cities that were infected by cyber outside of the United States?
Wow.
I'm trying to think.
Not right.
I know that WannaCry impacted a bunch of cities, particularly in the UK, but cities in terms of they were hitting the municipalities, but I don't know if they were actually hitting the governments of the cities. That's a great question. I don't know. Karen, do you have any ideas?
No, I'd have to follow up back on that one. And if whoever answered that question wants to identify themselves and through some back channel, we'll happily happily check into that and get an answer back to them. But I don't know off the top of my head. I feel like there have been, but I don't know right off the top of my head to answer that right now.
Yeah, that's exact same. That's my response as well. I know that they have occurred, but I can't name them off the top of my head right now. We do have their information, so we will get back to you on that question. And then Joel, this is a quick question for you. The last question we have so far is with Zips. Would the cities be able to see the employees' personal data on their devices?
Yeah, so based off of there's several privacy controls. It just depends on if it's employee owned. You want to have as much data collection, especially when there's a threat. But you can also modify it depending on if it's an elected official who may not want all their information out there, comparative to an employee that's out there doing inspections. You may want to be collecting as much as you can since it's an employee-owned device. So it just varies on the different levels, but you can adjust it, and I believe we have a fact sheet on all the different privacy controls that you can control to enable or disable. Yeah,
no, that's completely correct. We We can make it where it's all the way down to the deployment that the city did, which is zero information, even forensic data leaving the device, all the way to complete forensic data. It is important to note that Zimperium's engine couldn't care less about any personal information, so we don't collect any personal information. The extent of anything that might be there is depending on if the cities wanted to do it. For instance, for the EMM or the MDM solution that Chul was talking about, they might use email as a means to be able to get back to people that have been impacted on, let's say, city-owned devices. But we can literally tailor it to exactly down to what you want. But PII is nothing that we pay any attention to, which is why we literally had to do next to nothing to enable our coverage for GDPR in the European theaters. So we're good on that side. Well, I don't see any other questions. So what I'd like to do is thank Karen and Chul for your time. Thank you guys very much. And thank everybody else. Once again, this will be up on our website in an archive fashion soon. And we thank everybody for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.